thanks for joining us today. I have Greg Ferron, who is CEO of Treasury Metals. So thanks for joining us today, Greg.
Yeah, thanks. It's a pleasure to be here. Nice to see you, Deb.
Nice to see you too. So I wanted to ask you a few questions. I know that you recently made an acquisition, which we'll get to, but I think that it would be valuable to learn a little bit about Treasury Metals because I think it really is underfollowed and relatively unknown in the Canadian markets. So maybe you can take us through a little bit of background on yourself as well as the project.
Sure. Yeah, happy to. Yeah, so Treasury Metals, we trade on the Toronto Stock Exchange under the symbol TML. We've been quite active over the last few years developing the Goliath Gold Project in northwestern Ontario. It's an excellent project right on the Trans-Canada Highway with excellent infrastructure. It's a proposed open pit and underground mine. And in September of last year, we received the federal approval to build a mill and tailings facility, which we're quite excited about. And it is underfollowed partly by design, just knowing that we were looking at consolidating this gold camp, which we've now been successful in bringing in the largest deposit within closest proximity to Goliath. So we're quite excited to create this new gold camp in Ontario, bringing over 3 million ounces of gold in the combined portfolio.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the acquisition that you made?
Yeah, sure. So we're buying, we were looking at a number of projects within close proximity to the Goliath project because we felt that there is potential to increase the production profile because we had that permit to build up to a 5,000 ton per day mill and tailings facility. So within close proximity, about 2 kilometers from the border of Goliath, with about 25 kilometers distance between the two deposits, was the Goliath Gold Project. It's a 1.7 million ounce open pit resource. It was owned by First Mining, and we agreed to acquire the project, and they're going to become an equity holder, and they're also going to participate longer term through a royalty and production cash payments in the future. So we're very excited because it's going to increase the scale of the overall project, the mine life, and a bigger shift towards open pit production. So we think it's really going to increase that institutional participation and the ability to attract project financing, while at the same time they get to benefit from what Goliath has, is that infrastructure right on the Trans-Canada Highway and that permit to build a mill and tailings facility.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the structure of the transaction and why First Mining was willing to sell you the asset?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so First Mining saw, predominantly the big benefits of the synergies, enhanced production profile by combining the assets, significant cost savings for both projects to be continued to develop on a standalone basis. So those were some of the big reasons. The fact that we had that permit obviously would allow their resource to get cash flowing much quicker had they continued on a standalone basis. So they also wanted to focus on developing their Spring Pole project, which is also further north in northwestern Ontario. It's quite a large project. So this allowed them to focus on that and then to participate in this exciting Goliath Goldlund combination through an equity interest. And they'll have some governance through board participation as well.
So they'll retain upside through equity as well as the stream?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, and then when talking about the combined assets, you were telling me earlier about there's some dynamics with having an underground mine as well as having feed from an open pit mine. Can you explain that a little bit more for the audience?
Yeah. So that was one of the big reasons Treasury shareholders are benefiting from it, because we have a fairly small open pit, and then the cash flow from that would repay the bank debt and then develop our underground, which is quite a robust underground. We believe there's a lot of potential to find higher grade zones once you get underground mining. But it's always nice to be able to de-risk the asset by continually blend open pit ore. You can, the undergrounds typically in Ontario would be anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 tons per day. So be able to blend that ore. So with the Goldlund acquisition, we get that much larger open pit, 1.7 million ounces at approximately 2 grams. So that's what was in it for the Treasury shareholders.
Okay, other than increasing the size of the resource and the potential production, how does this acquisition change your timelines and the future of the company?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, good question. So there's a lot of synergies, first of all, from economics of scale, building a much bigger mill. So you have, much better margins, lower all-in costs with that open pit production as well. And then we've got a huge strike length now. We've got one of the largest land packages in northwestern Ontario, over 300 square kilometers multiple deposits along strike and a much greater chance of making discoveries. So the timeline isn't really going to change. Goliath will continue down its permitting path. The only difference is we're going to propose to build a bigger mill to allow for that trucking of ore from Goldlund. And then for them, they'll run down a parallel path of continuing through their economic studies, their permitting. They have to get up to speed on Goliath. They're behind on the development curve, but it'll be much easier to permit their project because they're not going to have to do a mill and tailing facility. So nothing really will change with the timeline. And then longer term, a lot of the mid-tiers and majors are looking for deposits in a great jurisdiction like Ontario. We've got the infrastructure. Now we've got the larger resource. We've got the much larger land package. And what they're looking for is the ability to find discoveries as well. So we think this transaction positions us very well for that potential, two-phase. Either you put this in production, it's near production, it's in a great jurisdiction, or you get this set up in the next 12 to 18 months for an exit through a sale to a mid-tier.
We can talk about what mid-tiers look like, or large mining companies look at for acquisitions, which is scale and safe jurisdictions. And what would you add to that?
Well, in our case, I think they like the fact that it's you've got a combination of both an open pit and underground, because as many of us know from places like Kirkland Lake and Red Lake, there's a lot of potential in these underground mines, which is right at the production source in our case at Goliath. But then you also get that safer, lower cost open pit production from Goldlund. So it really is a match made in heaven for mid-tiers. And then that big land package is what they're looking for. A lot of the Australian producers, they're used to owning 300, 400, 500 square kilometer land packages. And the other thing too is there is other consolidation we can do in the district. So I think for us, we have to continue de-risking it. That's one thing the mid-tiers will want, further de-risking of the combined project. And then if we can make additional acquisitions or additional discoveries in our camp, I think that'll attract a lot of attention from institutional investors and corporates.
Yeah, I agree. When talking about the mining camp, you think that you now are in an emerging mining camp, a new district. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so we're kind of surrounded by, several big camps in northwestern Ontario. You've got Newmont's Musselwhite camp. And then, of course, you've got Red Lake, which is a lot of exciting things happening there with Pure Gold, Great Bear, and Evolution acquiring it recently. And then at the bottom of our greenstone belt, you've got the Rainy River Project. And so our problem in our camp, Dryden, it was fragmented. There was a bunch of small deposits, as I mentioned earlier, and then there was the Goliath and the Goldlund project. So what we had to do was consolidate it to create some critical mass. There's a big benefit of economics of scale in terms of lower all-in costs. So that was why we think we've now created this emerging district. And, we've got the permit now, which is not easy nowadays to get permits in mills. Obviously, from an environmental perspective and First Nations and different new regulations are in place, it's not easy to get permits. So not like other camps like Val-d'Or, where you may see multiple mills within the same 20, 30 kilometer radius. That's unlikely to happen today. So having that permit is significant for not only for us, for the entire region, employment opportunities as well.
Well, it sounds like you've set yourself up for success this year. What's next for Treasury other than doing a webinar with us on this? I believe it's
I'm excited about the webinar. Next is just getting out talking to institutional investors and retail investors that we may not have had access to before because they felt the project was too small, for example. So that's the current focus is get the company in the hands of different institutional investors, and I think re-rating the stock as well. We're currently trading around $30 an ounce. The 3 million ounces on the Trans-Canada Highway, our peers are trading at much higher multiples. So that's kind of the short-term plan. And the second thing is going to be articulating that new development path going forward and giving some confidence in that things aren't changing with Goliath in terms of its development path. It's actually going to be sped up because we think we'll have better access to capital. And then second, how we're going to integrate Goldlund seamlessly into that development plan.
Well, it sounds like you made a very accretive acquisition, at least on an EV to ounce basis and a geographical basis. So congrats on pulling that off. And yeah, I look forward to the webinar and hearing a little bit more. I believe that you're going to have your technical guy on the call with us.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
For those interested in a little bit more of the geology, I'm sure he'll be able to answer some of those questions. And yeah, congrats on the acquisition. It sounds really exciting.
Okay, thanks, Deb. Then look forward to the webinar next week.